slides, please send an email after the webinar to info@solutionXchg.com. That is spelled info@solutionXchg.com. But let's get started with our presentation today. I would like to just give you a little overview of who solutionXchg is. We have been in business for the past 10 years, bringing innovative software solutions with top references to the US market. Our owners and our consultants have more than 20, not combined, but each 20 years of SAP archiving and document management experience. We have been active in this environment, every single person in our organization for more than 20 years, and have great knowledge in every aspect of data archiving as well as document management solutions, and as is with this presentation around text extracts as well. solutionXchg is a premier KGS content server for storage reseller and system integrator, and we also sell in a regulatory compliant storage solution by Eternity called ICAS. Again, the company is specialized on low-cost, high-quality, high ROI SAP add-on solutions and projects from selected vendors, bringing them to you as our customers. And with that, I would like to hand it over to our speaker today, who will be Mitchell Silverstein from one of our partners, Brandywine. Mitchell, would you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Kristen. I am one of those with 20 years of experience in the SAP market, primarily in the data archiving document management space. And we've partnered with solutionXchg since it came into being 10 plus years ago. And Brandywine is a reseller of add-on products that support the tax and audit extraction and data archiving space as well. And we'll review some of those in the course of the presentation. Our primary objective today is to talk about supporting tax audits primarily, and in a live ERP system. It could be ECC, it could be S/4HANA. It doesn't really matter in that regard. So the primary objective, as you can see, is to assure, number one, that only authorized users are performing the audits, because we're talking about access to sensitive financial data and related content, and as well as to ensure that that content goes only where it's supposed to go without being altered along the way. With that, the notion is that audits are not performed in a live system primarily, and that's why an independent process to perform the extraction process and a verification process and getting the content away from your SAP system is designed to prevent audit within a live system, which allows for fishing expeditions and is not generally advisable for providing for audit purposes. And I'll also highlight that not only are we talking about data, but also where necessary, reference documents, which could include vendor invoices or other attachments, can be extracted at the same time and provided at the same time. And while we're talking about getting content out of the system in a secure and authorized way, I've just added a couple other scenarios that are similar but different that can come into play as well. And the methods and concepts and tools can apply here as well. Some of those are internal audit, which are near term about who changed what. That's different than financial audits. External audit is very similar to a tax audit from the IRS or others. And then very specialized extraction can also include providing content for legal discovery, such as for an FDA audit about materials and how they were handled, or splitting out a subset of an entire company code because of a merger, M&A activity, even a full database decommissioning, extracting everything, which is transactional data, master data, and system data. So we'll look at a little bit of that, and you can conceptualize how getting financial reporting out of the system can be extrapolated and extended into these other areas as well, not just the financial side, but also logistics and manufacturing, if needed. So the main considerations when we look primarily at a tax audit situation is how broad is the scope that you're looking at. These are going to affect conceptually the methods that are used and potentially the tools that are used. Is this a US only or America's only situation? Are there one or multiple multinationals, especially European countries with different requirements? And how broad, even in US or across different countries, is the legal entity definition? Is this a single entity, 6 entities, 260 legal entity situation? All of those have been encountered, have different consequences. The second main concern is how do you determine what your requirements actually are? One of those best ways to do it is to let past be prologue. If there have been past financial audits, IRS audits, and there have been requests for information, that is a foundation for what may be needed in the future, but it's not exclusive to that. But the whole notion of determining what the actual specific requirements are at a granular level can be a fairly complicated and complex process unto itself. The third component, how frequent the audit activity is and when is it performed? When is the data extraction performed? Is it performed years in advance or is it performed on demand? Is the database subject to data archiving, meaning not everything's online, or do you have to perform the extraction before the archiving occurs? Again, that can force the in advance model, which has some downsides to it. And then the fourth component, how large a volume are we talking about? Is this a million transactions a year, a million transactions a month, or potentially a million financial transactions in a day? The implications of that, as you can imagine, are considerable when talking about extracting that to a set of files and trying to provide that in a meaningful way to a third party. And then lastly, is there a cost to using certain software, whether directly from a license perspective or indirectly if it's free software, but it requires extra effort to make use of it. Inside of the scope consideration, I'll just highlight a couple of those that come into play. In the US, if it's IRS-centric, there's a fairly consistent approach to dealing with that has been around for the last 20 years. It hasn't changed much overall, which is primarily starting with trial balances, getting down to the detail behind the balance changes, and then vendor and customer specifics as needed. And there's a continuous approach for the IRS to make data requests, start the clock on a 30-day cycle saying, please provide for 2012, 13, and 14, still under audit, and this is the information that's desired. So generally there's a lag of a number of years. Some companies are under constant audit with a tighter time frame, but generally speaking, it's not show me last month's activity or last year's activity. The other component of that is in a multinational situation, various countries have instituted their own specific requirements. The SAFT requirement is a specific nature of output, but the approach for Spain's definition of what they require versus Portugal's definition of what they require is only common in the sense that the output format is similar, the methodology and the inputs need to differ, and the verifications need to differ. So there are complexities across multiple countries, and that list grows. And France also has its own specific output requirements and content requirements as well. That's called the FEC. So depending on how broad a footprint the company has and whether you're trying to solve just the US topic or the multinational topic will impact the approach to take as well. All right, just here, I'm showing a constellation of data, technically speaking, in an SAP database, table-driven, and the notion is, from a tax audit perspective, everything starts in the center with financial postings, but can broaden out. Does it need to include reference documents, sales and purchasing, for example? Does it need to include master data? And then when you have that answer, how far into, how granular do you need to go there? Do you need all the fields in a table? Generally speaking, not, or are you looking at just the most consequential ones from an audit perspective and can exclude text fields, and others. So that was part of the requirements definition, and different tools handled the depth question and the breadth question in different ways and with more or less effort. When trying to look at an existing system and trying to answer some of the questions about what countries are relevant and affected and how many company codes do we actually have and what's the volume that affects the utilization of certain tools, this sort of a breakdown that you see now is a typical approach to looking not only at company codes within a country and volume, but also provides for controls when a tool is used also. So that control counts are essential as one of the steps to validating that the results of an extraction process match up with the online system or the online plus archives where that applies. So that's part of the what am I extracting question, and we'll see some of those various topics of what, when, where, and how popping up throughout the presentation. Right, this slide that you've seen here, perhaps in other segments of the SolutionXchg presentation suite, talks about data archiving and data lifecycle from creation through destruction. That can be a 7-year or a 10-year cycle depending on the country. But generally speaking, the useful life of online content is fairly short, and over a period of time, it may be subject to data archiving out of the online system, held in an archive, and then ultimately destroyed. When we talk about the financial audit, that's usually a blip somewhere out in year 3 or 4 potentially, and it's one of those rare uses before data is destroyed. As we talked about other possibilities for extraction, there can be lawsuits, and then how do you satisfy the legal discovery aspect as well? That's mentioned here as another blip. But the main question about when to perform the extraction is tool specific, is does it need to be performed before archiving happens after year 2 or 3, but before the audit occurs? Or do you have the ability to perform the extraction on demand in year 4 or 5 after archiving at the time of audit when the specific questions are known about what do I need to provide and when? The volume of data we spoke about briefly previously, but what it has implications for is how long does this process take? It can take, in a typical situation, 1 to 3 calendar months to perform the data extraction over time in a production system, interlaced with other activities going on in production, given that the extracts are fairly large and the run times can be fairly long. There are considerations there. There is the fact that extractions will take up space in a file system somewhere, and depending again on the data volume, that can be 100 gigabytes of space, it can be 500 gigabytes of space, it can be 2 to 3 to 10 terabytes of space. Depending on the online volume, there's a mapping to what the likely extraction volume will be as well. So that's a consideration in advance to take into account. And then once the extract exists, the whole notion about reporting and verification of the content will be impacted by the total volume of the extract and how large it has become. Sometimes they're too large to validate in a traditional online sense. It requires other methods there as well.
Mitchell, sorry to interrupt quickly. I just want to highlight again, if anybody would like to pose questions, please pose them in the question panel on the GoToWebinar administration console. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you, Kristen. So what we'll show in the next slides are the methods and paradigms, some of which are standard SAP built in and free in quotes, and some are add-ons. Free versus add-on, we'll look at what some of those trade-offs are shortly. The 5 standard methods or standard and add-on methods we're going to look at briefly. I won't read through the slides, but we'll touch upon standard SAP options and then add-on options that are available in the market. The 4 main questions we're going to answer at the bottom with regard to the paradigm is what to extract and how flexible that can be, when the extraction can occur, which is, does it matter if the data has been archived or not? Can it be on demand or not? How the process works and how much data is extracted and how much it costs as well will come into play. So the considerations, again, domestic versus multinational, will have some impact. In the SAP standard Dart delivered tool, there's a combination of that plus other SAP delivered programs that support the multinational situation, and AEC is a framework that has add-ons for multinational scenarios as well. So the very simplistic model concept is online transactions. If I can see it online, I should be able to get it to a file and provide it to third parties. That only works in a very simple case where you can run a trial balance report, send that to a file, hand it off to a third party. That's not very satisfactory because the third party can't do much with a static report in a report format. Or you can dump data out table by table using standard SAP online display and export functionality. Very rarely used except as a supplement to the primary methods that we'll look at next. BW, can it be used? In theory, yes, but because it's not the system of record, it's not generally recommended and generally not recognized as an adequate source in the first place, even if it has enough granular content. But for the most part, BW is aggregated by definition, has been modified over time, and therefore getting granular line item reports out of it is not its main purpose and generally is not suitable for a tax audit situation. The SAP Dart tool, the data retention tool, it's standard in every system since 4.6c, which most everyone should be running by now. Its predefined scope is primarily US-centric. It can be used for Canada with some modification, for example, for Mexico, for other standardized countries. It gets more complicated when there are specific country-specific requirements that come into play. We'll look into that briefly in a moment. It's one of its constraints, which is why it's a yellow, is Dart extracts, by virtue of not being able to read archived content in a normalized way, means the extracts have to be run before archiving occurs. And if you're in a situation where archiving has already been occurring and it's time to extract content, there are very extreme limitations on whether Dart can fit that model or not. Even in the case where archiving has not occurred, you're extracting years in advance and making a best guess at what's going to be needed down the road. And archiving may happen in between the time the extract was made and the time it's delivered for audit support. And it is free, but there are consequences to that because of the constraints. All right, very quickly, the 1, 2, 3 step. We already defined, ideally, in a common way, what needs to be extracted by one tool or another, Dart or something else. The extract programs run, again, that could take 1 to 3 months, depending on volume. And then subsequent to that, that superset of what was extracted has to be filtered out to meet specific audit requests at the time by specific company codes or otherwise. So there's a reporting layer that then takes a subset of the original extract, creates another large set of extract files to pass on to third parties. And by definition and within customizing of the Dart tool, you can affect to some extent what's extracted. The main purpose here is to show, even though a financial posting may comprise 180 header fields and 282 line item fields, only a very small subset of that is predefined in Dart to be extracted. Anything extra to be added to that, or custom fields or custom tables, requires not only customizing, but also custom coding to make that happen. All right, and just the last part of Dart about cost is there's no such thing as a free lunch, because the software is free, but the cost to extend by extra fields, extra tables, or trying to perform on-demand extracts when the requirements change requires not only custom coding, but also regenerating extracts and potentially extra non-Dart capable functionality to get to the archive content. Dart does run under S4. It runs natively. It also has backward compatible views, just like the standard data compatibility views. So we can see the new data structures in S4 as if they were ECC-like. and that's similar to other reporting capabilities in S4. All right, so the short story about Dart. Yes, it's ready to run out of the box. The downsides on the weakness side is it's limited to how it's been predefined or how it's been extended, and that extension again is custom by definition. There are cases where that can be a several week process, and there are cases that can be a several month process to extend Dart to meet specific requirements. Right, the first add-on to supplement Dart is in the case where data archiving has occurred and you want to use the Dart tool, the CDART add-on from PBS is designed just to plug that gap. It uses the same or equivalent of the Dart functionality. It just adds the ability to read the archive data and make it look as if it's online so that you get one extract comprised of both online and archive content at the same time. It doesn't provide any other functionality about extensions to see more fields than were extracted in the first place or were predefined in the first place. So the only benefit in that case is you could run this extract at the time of the audit request as opposed to having run it 3 years in advance to try to be ahead of the curve of data archiving. That's its primary benefit. The downside to add this add-on is that it has to change with every change in ECC. Anytime a structure changes, there can be potential for the CDART tool to have to change with it. The plus side, as mentioned before, is it gives flexibility of when the execution occurs. Doesn't make it any smaller, any faster. It just adds that data access. The audit extraction cockpit from TJC, again, scope is similar to Dart in the sense that it can be US or multinational or both. It's designed to be across the board. It can deal with the complexity of multiple legal entities, and its primary strength is that it is archive enabled, meaning it can see online content and archive content at the same time without any extra coding or extra effort required. So the timing of when the extracts are run is not bound to be in advance. It can be on demand, and also by virtue of being on demand, it can also be much smaller and targeted to very specific data sets. So instead of guessing 3 years in advance, extract everything possible, but I only need 5 fields, you can extract just the 5 fields that are relevant for a certain table at that time. So it's much faster and smaller in the on-demand scenario. Again, the same flow as shown before. You still have to know what to extract in the first place by some method. The extraction is a set of programs, generates a set of files, and then you provide the files to the auditor. The other benefit in this case is that there's not an extract and then a filtering of the extract into a smaller extract as the Dart tool, but what you extract is what you provide. You already know what you need, you provide it and pass it through after validation. So those are primarily amongst the strengths. It solves the what question because you know what you're being asked for at the time. You don't have to guess years in advance. You can perform it at the time you need it and not have to pre-build these over the course of 3 months, 3 years in advance. And how it is utilized is that extractions reporting is the same task, also reduces the effort and the space consumption and the time to delivery. The last benefit is that there are very specialized SAP and FEC for France solutions provided that use the same framework as the AEC that are targeted very specifically to those countries' specific requirements, whereas the Dart tools or Dart and SAP solutions are either additional programs or additional data views still based on the same data constraints about having built the extracts years in advance or adding the extra tool to see the archived content. So this again is designed to show how the concepts and how reality come together and how there are various tools that can help to meet those various requirements. The comparative analysis, again, is pretty much what I've gone through before, but you're free to review it again. The timing being one of the major issues and the volume of data that's extracted really come together in the paradigm. which is Dart as a tool is a best guess. Generally in advanced model, the AEC provides the dynamic selection of tables, fields, custom tables, and custom fields without custom programming, and can be run as the request is required, not in advance, unless that's desired as well. So, Kristen, I will really come back and see at this point if you have any questions coming back from the audience, because what we're trying to provide is some guidance, a very light touch at this point, about what the specific circumstances can be for a tax audit or those other related types of data extraction scenarios, and what methods and paradigms are really the best fit for the given situation. That, back to you.
Thank you, Mitchell. Yeah, we have one question that so far came in, and that is, how long does it typically take to determine the requirements for what to extract?
Right. The requirements definition that I referred to early on is a wild card. The normal case, the best case, is typically 1 to 2 calendar months because of the various parties that come into play. It can be partly from the audit team, and the controlling team, which is generally not SAP savvy. So there may be a provision for, here's what we had to do outside of SAP before to solve a prior audit, and here's how the audit went, and the content and reports we provided and the data we provided. But trying to map that into SAP, finding the right people, and then discerning how to constrain that content and translate that specific data requirement into how the tools operate and who's going to run them and who's going to validate them and provide an equivalent content or provide custom extensions, is typically a 2 to 3 month cycle, calendar-wise. And we, from a consulting perspective, try to aid that process, not just be technicians in how tools are working, but how to explore how an environment is built, what the nuances can be, how to flesh that out with help of other business partners inside the company, and then come up with the best solution for that situation.
Okay.
All right, back to you.
Thank you very much. We have not received any further questions. So this concludes the presentation of our webinar today. And I would like to ask the audience if you would like to see a demo of this AEC Audit Extraction Cockpit, we'd be happy to arrange for that. Please just contact us and let us know if you would like to dive a little deeper into this topic, and we'll set up another meeting with you and cater that more to any requirements that you have within your organization.
Or the standard Dart tool as well, I would just add.
Yeah, and with that, thank you very much for listening today and joining us, and goodbye from all of us. Thank you.